All right, hello Honors 110. So for today's class, we have two shorter readings we're lined up for. This is largely on purpose because I know essay number one was also due. And so with that, I hope you're able to give your attention to these two readings. The SLE in particular, quite short, quite straightforward in its sensibility. The Enzel Dua, a little bit more complex. So with both of these readings, again, they're not super long. And for both of them, actually, most of the questions I'm going to bring up have more to do with kind of broader content and big ideas that these readings are grappling with, as opposed to more granular, like reading specific quotes, that sort of thing, like I often do. But so for this edition, I want to actually start with the Ellie Slee article itself, the one about Beyonce can have her cake and eat it too. So with this one, it relates to a music video or a song, Drunk in Love. I'm going to include a copy of the music video below, largely just to give you a little sense of kind of the flavor of this song. I have to imagine some of you are familiar with this artifact, but some of you might not be at this point. It has been a good bit of time since it came out. But I encourage you just to listen to a little bit of it just to get a feel for it if you're not familiar with it, and particularly to skip ahead. I think it's about like 3.5 minutes in when you can see Jay-Z come into screen there to get a sense of specifically the part that Slee is critiquing here in her article. But with this, I'm also going to include a shorter video. It's a snippet, as long as I can find it. This has been a little bit of a moving target, but I have a good version as I'm recording this that hopefully will still be up at the time I'm posting the class. But it's a scene from the film What's Love Got to Do with It? It's a story of the real life story of Tina Turner and Ike Turner that's referenced in Slee's article, and that's the basis for the problematic lyric, or at least Slee thinks that it's problematic, that's depicted in the song. And so with that one, I should give a fair warning. It does depict domestic violence, and so I will understand if you choose not to watch that. I think you can still follow the conversation without it. I think it fills in some blanks and gives a fuller context for those who aren't familiar with the film and who are reasonably comfortable watching that sort of thing. But with that, in terms of the big questions I wanted to get at, first, and perhaps most obviously, is just what do we understand to be the argument Slee is making? This is a case where we have an author who's engaging with someone else's art, Beyonce's song, and making some claims about it, and what it means, and why Slee finds it to ultimately be problematic. What is she taking issue with here? And do we agree with what she's saying? I think there's probably a base logical level in which I think most people would probably agree, but I have had some students push back a little bit in terms of where Slee is kind of directing her anger, as well as some of the kind of just scale that is kind of portrayed at, as in, is this actually that big of a deal for a pop song where probably most people didn't realize what the lyrics were really saying at the time? So I think there's a lot to kind of unpack there, and what we kind of think about and how we react to it. With that, I think there's also some really big questions that this piece introduces around topics like, what is the responsibility of a celebrity to be a role model or to be a representative of a movement? I think Slee, I'm getting kind of back to the previous question, but I think that Slee would kind of make the case that part of the issue here is Beyonce put herself front and center as this big feminist figure right before she released this song. But so with that, is it a responsibility of celebrity to, set a good example, to live up to kind of our cultural ideals? Or is that too much to expect of our celebrities? It's a bit dated now, but I tend to refer back to the example of Charles Barkley, who I assume some of you still know as a basketball commentator. When I was your age, I hate to sound like the old man here, but Barkley was one of the elite NBA players, one of the best who was doing it. But he famously said, kind of towards the peak of his basketball abilities, I'm not a role model. Please don't tell your kids to imitate what I do. And Barkley was kind of famously gambling and drinking and doing all kinds of stuff that generally isn't considered the most morally upstanding behavior. He kind of made no bones about just being an adult who made his own choices, and saying that people should focus on parenting their own kids. Don't tell them to look up to him for that kind of behavior. So again, just circling back to that question, is there a responsibility of celebrities to, behave better, to set an example, so on and so forth? Similarly, I think this also invites kind of a conversation around so-called cancel culture, and this idea that we sort of see someone do something problematic and we say, okay, we're no longer going to invest in this person. We're not going to listen to their music anymore, buy their music, buy their merchandise, go to their concerts, so on and so forth. And it's the kind of thing where I think it's relatively easy to cancel something that you're not invested in if you just don't really care about an artist in the first place and they do something regrettable in public. It's easy to just kind of wash your hands of them. But if it's an artist who you are more invested in, and then something happens, there are harder choices to make about where you're going to draw your lines or which values you're going to place one in front of another. So in any event, I'm just curious kind of, what we think of that whole conversation as well around cancel culture. Why didn't it happen in this case? Slee wrote this article about it. And I'll be honest, I don't know that Beyonce ever read the article, ever even heard of Slee. So maybe that's part of the equation here. But, why didn't this kind of stick with Beyonce? Why has she had such a successful career where, she's going on to win major awards, record really popular music, tour really successfully, despite kind of this problematic lyric. Okay, I think that's the bulk of what I want to get to with Slee there. So that's plenty of food for thought. I'll be interested to see the discussion around that, and obviously feel free to bring in your own thoughts as well. But then going into the Ansel Dua as well. So in this piece, we have Ansel Dua kind of recounting her experience kind of from childhood and kind of all the way through a good chunk of her adult life here. One choice that Ansel Dua makes, and it references this in the introductory material to the version that I assigned, it references that Ansel Dua pointedly said that this essay could be republished other places, but that it could not be translated, that we couldn't just kind of take the parts that are in Spanish and make them English, which is in and of itself kind of a unique choice. Typically, authors want their work to be translated in terms of they will often be offered an additional deal, essentially, to have someone translate their work and republish it in another country for a different market. Ansel Dua is not interested in that, or at least not in this particular context. She insists that they maintain the Spanish alongside the English. I think this is a choice on a number of levels, a number of motivations behind this thing. So in any event, I'm interested in seeing what we think of that, how we interpret that choice. Some of this can be based on what we have in the text itself. Some of it can just be based on sort of your own thought process around this. But why leave some of that, Spanish and certain dialects of Spanish in there alongside the text? I'm also interested in what I consider sort of a collage structure for this essay. So we weave between Ansel Dua's personal experience as well as these bigger kind of historical notes, in addition to quotes from other outside poetry and art and elsewhere, and sort of how we combine these things. What's the thought process here? What's the impact for you as a reader? Why do you think that Ansel Dua constructed it this way? And then otherwise with this, there's a lot in this short essay. I'm just going to focus on one other very specific moment in this essay. This is on page 208 in the first paragraph that bleeds over from the previous page, where the last line of that paragraph reads, "We speak a patois, a forked tongue, a variation of two languages." And here, this word patois. So if this were a live class, I would just actually ask the class, who knows what this word means? And sometimes we have a few people who do or can piece it together on context, but usually I get a lot of blank stares or I don't know, right? And so to define the term, basically it is like what the words to follow say, a forked tongue, a variation of two languages, basically like an informal way of kind of combining languages, kind of a slang version of a language. When you hear people talk about speaking Spanglish, for example, where it's kind of a mix of English and Spanish, but people who are involved in kind of one foot in each community kind of understand what a person is saying. It's that kind of thing. And so I highlight this moment, A, just because I think it's an interesting language choice here, an interesting concept, but also because in using kind of this elevated vocabulary, this isn't the only example, there's a whole bunch scattered throughout the essay, but I think part of what Ansel Dua is doing is highlighting that it's not as though it's not the language she uses in Spanish isn't translated because she doesn't know how to speak it in English. In fact, she actually probably has a more vast vocabulary than most native English speakers, but rather that she's kind kind of deploying language very specifically. So in this case, choosing a really advanced vocabulary word, really highfalutin language, while in other cases, she's going to choose to use less formal language or another language altogether because it kind of portrays the exact idea that she wants to get across or language that she wants to use. But okay, again, there's a whole bunch more in there as well, but I'm going to go ahead and cut off the video at that. So again, please feel free to share your thoughts in response to any of those questions or to other things you're thinking about coming out of the SLE or the Ansel Dua. All right, thanks as always for watching.